Welcome to the Merchant Sales Podcast.
Hey everybody, we got a great episode for you today as Blake Wilson from Beyond is going to break down the W-2 sales model and talk about how to be successful with a W-2 sales team. And really, he gives some great tips for individual agents, whether you're W-2 or 1099. He's actually out in the field working with reps on a regular basis and is able to provide some really good insights there. And if you're a manager building a team in this industry, really some interesting insights from Beyond. So that's Blake Wilson. Patty is still out, as I mentioned on the last episode. We're going to have her back here shortly. But, I do the questions from the field. And in that one, I talk about brushing your teeth. And I talk about the only number that you need to worry about. Don't worry, the brushing your teeth thing is a little bit of a joke I have at the end. But it's something I posted in our Facebook group recently, and I wanted to present it on the podcast in a little bit of a different format. So it will really help you out if you're having trouble taking action, if you're having trouble procrastinating, if you're not achieving the success that you could achieve. I think you're going to like the questions from the field. So let's jump into our interview with Blake Wilson. Hey everybody, I am here today with Blake, who is a VP of Sales at Beyond. How you doing today, Blake?
I'm doing great, man. How are you?
I am doing awesome. So really excited about our conversation today. Something I've been wanting to talk about for quite a while on the podcast, more in depth. So we're going to talk about succeeding with a W-2 agent team. We talk a lot about 1099. We're going to talk about W-2. But before we get into that, Blake, give us your backstory. How did you get into this crazy industry? What led you to Beyond?
Yeah, so I've been in the industry for almost a decade now, which seems crazy already. And the industry definitely found me on accident. Got done with college, chasing a football dream. Football dream didn't pay all the bills. I was playing arena football, and I applied for every single sales job under the moon.
Sure.
Trying to figure out a way to make some money. Landed with a little ISO that had a pretty large bank relationship. Was there for a couple of years. Pretty easy job. Didn't get a whole lot of training in the industry.
Right.
Selling some refurbished T7 pluses. Was on tiered pricing models. Learning the industry slowly.
Sure.
And was with them for a couple of years. Thought we might lose the bank relationship, so started searching for new opportunities. Heartland was recruiting me like crazy at the time, so jumped in head first in with them. Had a lot of success there over 3 years, outselling in the field, but kind of was looking for an opportunity to grow my career, get my feet in with a company that was starting off pretty early. Right. Heard about Beyond. I knew that they were starting. Obviously knew about Bob Carr with my time at Heartland and what he had done with his previous companies and the success that he's had, the culture that he's built, and the reputation.
Right.
And was something that I wanted to be a part of. So jumped in early. I think I'm like employee number 20 or 30, somewhere in that range.
Sure.
So I was here basically since day one and have, tried to help grow this thing. Came in, was selling right away, and then, moved my way up through leadership levels, and then been in the VP role for a little over a couple of years now.
Wow, that's awesome, man. Awesome. Okay, so let's dive into this a little bit. So I want to start off with recruiting. So talk to me about why do salespeople, come to Beyond? Who are you kind of searching for? Give me a little bit of information about how are you targeting and kind of finding the right people to add to your team that are going to be, W-2 sales reps?
Yeah, so we're targeting basically everywhere we can, through job posts, through LinkedIn, through networking in our local communities. But we're looking for, the typical sales guy or woman. We're looking for someone that's very hungry, they're driven, they've got a lot of self-discipline, I think is extremely important. And the other part that's, really important for our industry is they got to have some thick skin.
Right.
We've all walked into that merchant that has beat us up a little bit and able to walk out and still have the ability to overcome that and walk into the next merchant and try to set up an appointment or, go do an install. Those can be tough. So I think confidence goes a long way with that. But, just the average salesperson that, has all of those qualities and is also, it doesn't hurt if they're super connected. They can have a conversation with anything. Those attributes go a long ways for us.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And so, I'm kind of curious because obviously a lot of our listeners are more in the 1099 world, right? What is it about, a lot about that side, obviously, I'm sure you're kind of recruiting against that model a lot and vice versa. So how do you see the 1099 versus W-2 when it comes to recruiting? Is it, are there advantages that you have with the W-2 position and kind of the more of the stability? And, like in recruiting, are people coming to you and saying, oh, this is actually a W-2, like it's a real job? Or, you know what I mean? Like, what are kind of the things you see of 1099 versus W-2 in terms of recruiting people for this industry?
I think the W-2 piece, for when we're bringing people into the industry, or even, I mean, we don't go up against as much as you would think for the 1099 segment. But when we bring people into the industry, one, I think the W-2 piece does put a little comfort into them, that they know they're going to have the opportunity to have benefits right away. And it just feels more like something that they're comfortable with, because, that's kind of what our culture has showed, is not to go into the strict commission world, because that can be scary. Even though our W-2 positions are a commission base, but they're a little different than most other comp models. So that is always something that plays into it. Is just it's a comfort level. They know there'll be all of these pieces that they can fall into. And I think the other part that comes along with that, you said accountability, training, structure. Those are things that it depends on the person, and it's got to be the right fit for them.
Right.
But 1099, a lot of times, you're out there in the wild, wild west. You got to be very resourceful on your own.
Right.
You've got to have extreme amounts of discipline to go out and be successful, and you're probably not going to have as much support, out the gate. So for new people to the industry, my suggestion, and you might disagree with me, but I think to really learn the industry, getting in for a W-2 position, for those first couple of years, getting some of that support, understanding the industry, understanding, the interchange pieces, because we all understand that that's crazy. It can be a lot out the gate. So our training team, I would put them up against anybody in the industry. When we bring a new person on, they go through a 6-week training period. They've got a personal trainer per se. And they also have a leadership team that's out working with them shoulder to shoulder. Before the whole COVID thing, they're all shoulder to shoulder. We've obviously had to make some adjustments there.
But it's like screen to screen.
That's a huge part, because when they get through that first 6 weeks, they're gonna get a little bit of industry training. They're also gonna get a little bit of sales training. So they'll understand how to set an appointment in our industry. They'll understand how to run an appointment in our industry, and they'll understand how to do an install and set those proper expectations at the end of those 6 weeks. And during that 6 weeks, we're also going to get a lot of deals sold for them as well, by leveraging their network, and then just leveraging, going out and being able to set appointments and close them.
Yeah. And it's interesting. One of the reasons I wanted to have you on the podcast actually is because I definitely agree with you in terms of new people that come into this industry. And I've seen this firsthand. I mean, I actually see the numbers. I consult with a lot of companies, and, the failure rate of people that come into 1099 programs, and frankly W-2 programs, but to a lesser extent, the failure rate is shockingly high. Like, for any other industry, it would be like, why are we talking about any other problem? Like, this is almost the only problem. It's like, so many people come into our industry on a daily basis, and then so many of them exit, and somehow we end up with the same amount. And that's like a huge problem. And I think, the way I look at it is W-2 or 1099 is a question, at least my opinion is, like, it's a question of personality and, a drive and some of the things you mentioned, but the idea of, like, I'm going to start something new. Well, you're going to have to be trained, and you're going to have a mentor, and you're going to have, you know what I mean? Like, that's non-negotiable. And so I think one of the issues that you run into is, what I find at least, is companies that are going the W-2 model, for whatever reason right now, they are much more focused on that. As a general rule, I'm generalizing. There's some 1099 companies that are doing great with training, but I'm saying as a general rule, there's something about hiring a real employee where you're like, oh, wow, I got to do something with this person. You know what I mean? Like, I think a lot of 1099 companies just aren't doing that. And so I don't think it's necessarily a function of the label. I think it's more a function of just, you've got to do this stuff, right? Like, you're not going to be successful if you're not trained in a new industry, right?
Yeah, and I think that's, I don't think it's just our industry that kind of runs into that with salespeople. I think that's something that training never ends. I think we've got one of the best training teams in the industry, obviously, but are we perfect in every means? Does that mean we're going to make every perfect hire and they're all going to be successful? Obviously, that would be a dream world that we'd fall into. But we're trying to align as many resources and prop them up so that they come out the gates, and one, they can leverage our compensation model to make sure that, because the reason people fail is because they're probably not able to pay their bills.
Right, exactly.
Something they're running into like that financially is a
Yep.
trouble. We want to make sure we get that taken care of first and foremost. And, we're meeting all the financial goals that when we went through the interview process, that they're in a good spot at home, they're happy with their job, and they've got the flexibility that they want. So
Sure.
that's really what, it comes down to between our training and leadership of making sure we're propping these people
Sure.
up the best we can.
Okay, so let's back up a little bit. I want to talk about one other thing with recruiting real quick. So I want to talk about qualifications. So we talked in general terms, right? Like they need to be self-motivated, thick skin and all that. But I mean, as far as recruiting process though, how do you kind of institutionalize that or proceduralize that to the point where it's like, are you having them jump through some hoops where it's like you have to go through several interviews, or you have to be, some kind of questions you're asking? Like, what are you doing to make sure you're not getting someone on board that is going to fail for sure?
Yeah, absolutely. So, the first part is when we find a candidate, whether on LinkedIn or they applied for a job. We're first going to probably have a quick 30-minute call, which is just a pre-screen. We're going to go a little bit about Beyond, let them know who we are, where we were, where we're going, how they would fit into that model, some of the growth opportunities within Beyond. And then I'm going to learn a little bit about their experience and kind of challenge them a little bit on what our day-to-day looks like and make sure that they're still interested in it. Then we're going to dive into the comp model. 100% commission is not made for every single person out there, no matter if it's a 1099 comp or our W-2 comp. That's got to be something that they're interested in and they want to move forward. So once we get that, their buy-in, that's something they want to move forward, we think they're going to be a good candidate, then we move them into an interview process. And the interview process, I'm going to dive deeper into some of their sales experience, some of the things that make them tick, some of the reasons why they want to be successful. I think all of those pieces fall into it. And, how disciplined, you can really uncover, what their discipline levels are if they've had previous sales experience. I'm going to jump into a little bit of, what their 30-second intro sounds like, how they feel they do best at closing their deals. And once we get through that process, if I believe that they're a good fit for who we are as a company, for our culture, then we're going to have another call. We're going to jump into our 94 comp model that, Bob's had since 1994.
Right.
And we're going to go through that and understand what their financial goals are, what they have to make the next 3 months, what they have to make the next 6 months, and then really what they're dreaming, what their long-term financial goals are down the road. And we're going to dive into that with some of our calculators and then show them the activity, what they'll have to do, how many deals they'll have to close per month, so that they really understand the work that will go behind this. Because it's, as we all know, you can be extremely successful financially in this industry, but it's not going to be easy. You got to put in some work.
Right.
And so I want to make sure that they understand what that looks like. And then once they do that, I'll always let them know that we'll have a discussion. I usually discuss it with, one of our senior VPs or our CSO about the candidate. And then in the meantime, I have the reps through this interview process go out and talk to some business owners, have that conversation, see if they like the feel of that conversation. I'll give them some things to say real quick that then they walk in there.
Right.
But just so they really understand it. And then when we come back with an offer, they'll really either be super excited about that offer because they want to come on, or they'll be like, I don't know if this is a good fit for me.
Right.
The owner was pretty mean to me when I walked in there and asked him about his credit card processing. So,
right.
That's really how we dive deep into it and try to understand if they're going to be a good fit. And even when you do that, I mean, it kind of narrows it down to we're trying to get the best candidates.
Sure.
And then some of the people in there, we've had people that come on with zero experience. I was probably one of them, but, wanted to be successful at it and was resourceful and kind of figured it out along the way.
Yeah. I love what you said about, talking to them about their financial reality, basically. I think that is just missing from a lot of, recruiting processes because, frankly, straight commission, there are people who maybe don't have that real strong sales background anyway, to where you just kind of instinctively know they're going to go broke before they succeed here, And I think one of the other big things, like for me, one of the things I'm always talking about is, it's one thing to train somebody who knows how to sell and train them how to sell merchant services. It's another thing to train somebody who doesn't know how to sell. Like That's where you got to be really, really careful. Like, I'm glad that you're a really motivated waiter or waitress. Like, that's awesome that you want to be more successful and you're looking for a new career. Is straight commission the right opportunity for that person? If they have 30,000 in the bank, maybe, but they're going to be terrible at it. And I think there's that level of like honesty and transparency like you're talking about. It's like, you got to tell them that, you can't just say, oh, you're going to do amazing at this. Come on in. No. You got to say, look, your first 2 months are going to be horrible. Seriously, you're going to get a ton of rejection. And here's the thing you have to understand though. It's like, you're going to get a lot of rejection, not because of merchant services, but because you don't know how to sell yet. And that's okay. I'm willing to work with you as long as you understand the first couple months are going to be really tough, So I don't know. What are your thoughts on that? Do you bring people on that have no previous sales experience, or is that like a requirement for the people you work with? Just out of curiosity.
It's not a requirement. Obviously, we've got the pillars that we believe in that are going to, showcase what you're going to be successful.
Right.
When we bring people in with little to no experience, it has to be something that we've vetted them. They know what those first couple weeks are going to look like. We also believe that with the right leadership in place and we're shoulder to shoulder, we're going to be able to go out and still make some things happen for them.
You can leverage their action.
Help them close, a few deals that we know would not have happened if they were out there by themselves.
Yeah,
so I think that's part of it. But really, kind of back to what we said earlier is going through some of the statistics with them. Hey, if you go out and make this many calls, you're going to probably get one appointment. And you're going to trip and fall into one appointment. And then, this is what your close ratio will look like.
Right.
Obviously, that's going to get better as you go down the road. But you're straight out of college. I mean, the only cold calling you've done, was, maybe over Facebook or something. And so, they don't have any experience there. But, we will take, we've got a few that, are starting here pretty soon that are fresh out of college. They meet all of the qualifications from personality, from a self-discipline. But there is going to be some struggle in the sales process. I mean, that's just something we know.
Yeah, and it's interesting too. I don't know how you feel about this, but I've always found that more transparency and more honesty. I think a lot of recruiters are afraid they're going to like maybe scare people off or bring people on with a negative, vibe. But what I find is when you're really honest with people and you say, look, you don't currently know how to sell. This is a sales job. Therefore, you're going to suck at this, for a week or two, hello, like it's a job, like you have to know how to do it and you don't. So I'm going to teach you. But I find that like when you tell people that, where you run into problems is when you don't tell people that, right? And then they come on board and they go out and they get rejected. And they're like, man, this job is terrible. And it's like, but if you were honest up front, they would realize, no, I'm terrible and I'm going to get better. And then they would actually stick it out sometimes. So anyway, I like that.
Yeah, if I had a recruit on the phone and they were like, "Hey, how is this? Is it easy out there?" I'm like, "Yeah, you can go out there and save every single person money. It's going to be simple. Everybody's going to want to work with you. It's great."
Right.
And then they come on the first 2 weeks and they just took 18 punches to the face every day. They're probably not going to be with us in 2 weeks because I set a completely different expectation for the job. But if they understand, what they're going to have to go through, and the work they're going to have to put in, and they're still super excited for it, and that's the candidate that I want.
You got a good person there. Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's move on here to, you've got a good candidate and we hope it's a good candidate. We want to get them to make their first 3 sales. So you've alluded to this several times already as far as training and even leadership of maybe helping out. Can you be any more specific with that? What exactly do you do to help that? Because I found, once a rep gets 3 sales under their belt, that seems to be a magic number where they're going to stick around a little longer. Like, oh, cool, I got 3. What's your thoughts on the necessary steps and actions for management and leadership to get them to 3 deals?
Yeah. So, our goal on day one is just to get them through the system. I mean, that's kind of what our goal is on day one. And then, the next 2 weeks, really our focus is on how can we create as much activity as possible. And so we're going to go out and try to set appointments. First, we're going to, one, go through the beyond promises. We feel like those are very important to us. So we'll dive into those. We'll give them a few distinctions of, things that they're going to run into that we know in the marketplace are going to be common things that they can articulate very easily. And then we're going to work through what their warm network is, probably out the gates. So we'll start to create a list. When I first came on, I knew where I got my car wash, knew where I got my haircut. I knew where I was 23. I knew the local liquor store. I knew a
Sure.
couple other things in the area. So I
Right.
went out and set, 10 appointments with people that I
Mm.
had some familiarity with, I could have an easy conversation with, and I could
Sure.
tell them what I'm doing.
Right.
And then I would bring in our leadership with us to help run those appointments. So you would go
Mm.
in, run the appointments. You'd show them the questions to ask to really understand the needs of that business and how we're going to create value and uncover pain points. So we bring the leadership in to do that. And when in between those appointments that we're running with the leadership, we're out showing them how we cold call. So basically,
Mm.
I'm in the VP of sales position. I was out cold calling last week in Des Moines with one of our reps. That's just something that
Right.
basically all levels, will do to help show them how to overcome the objections, some of the main things they run into.
Sure.
And if we're running those appointments and they're fairly warm, we'll be able to probably in 10 appointments, if we can get 10 appointments in those first 2 weeks,
Right.
we're gonna close over 3 of them with
Right.
our leadership team.
Sure.
They're gonna be able to go in and uncover easy pain points and
Right.
know what's going to make a difference for these ones.
Sure.
But a lot of times within those 10 appointments that they set, 5 of them are good. 5 of them are probably, not great appointments. They might be an account that, they're selling wristbands or something and they're doing, $500 a month in
Right.
processing.
Sure.
Not a great appointment for us, but that's
Sure.
the process. And then really what we're trying to do is kind of what I talked about earlier. We want them to be able to set appointments. That's number one. They've got to be able to create activities. So articulating what the value propositions are for Beyond, how to overcome the main objections that you run into this industry. We all kind of know some of the things that we run into. And then, how to run a professional appointment, truly try to create as much value as you can versus just going in and discussing price every single time.
Right.
And then 3, how to manage an install to do that properly. So those are the 3 pieces that we're trying to do. And, if we get 10 appointments, we're going to close 3 of them in those first 2 weeks.
Cool. I love it. Yeah, that's a really, really cool approach to get out there and really help, help the agent get those deals under their belt. I think is huge to build that confidence up. And it kind of lets, I think 2 things as well as side benefits. I mean, obviously it lets them see how you're doing it. So they get to see how you're closing the deal, but also it really keeps the leadership team sharp.
Yeah.
I'm really big about that. Like if you're, for me, it's like, I don't want to be a trainer and I haven't sold anything in the last, 6 months. You know what I mean? Like you want to be able, when a rep calls you, you want to be able to say, hey, I actually ran into that same objection last week and here's what I did,
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. I think that's a big part. And it's kind of crazy because COVID happened and I hadn't been out for a while.
yeah.
And we were going out to cold call and I was like, man, I'm a little rusty. I might need to do some practice in the car first. So
Right. It's crazy how you get, you get the little bit of nervousness. And it's, I probably walked into, I don't know, thousands and thousands of businesses and still every time, just a little nervous still every
a little
time.
nervous.
That's the way it is. Maybe there's some people that aren't, but for me, I'm always a little nervous walking in and, you don't know the person. And there's always that split second where you walk in the door and you go like, should I just pretend I'm a customer and not go up to the, not talk to the business owner? It's hard. It really is. So, yeah.
So
Good.
that's kind of a big part of, what we're doing. And as they see those first 2 weeks, because we'll get busy, right? We're running appointments, we're setting appointments, we're going to close a couple deals. So we'll have some installs to do as well.
Right.
And that's really where we can see, from the interview process, hey, I know this is what your financial goals are. This is how we build out your system. So every day, you have to accomplish this
Right.
in order to hit your financial goals. And this is what a winning day looks like. And I can't stop till I get right here. So that's a big part of it as well, is building out like what their system's going to look like.
Yeah. They've got to have their action goals in place, which is crucial. So, all right, let's kind of zoom out a little bit. I just want to get a general idea from you here. So we've talked a lot about the recruiting, getting people on board. So now let's talk about when you look at your agent team as a whole, what do you see that's setting your top performers apart from your average and your below average performers? I always like asking people this that are on the front lines, for all the people that are listening that are individual reps, they want to be a top rep, not an average rep. What are the top people doing that the average people are not doing?
One thing I think it's very simple that I'll hit on first is we just talked about system.
Right.
And then it's consistently working that every single day.
Yeah.
I think that's the first thing. And it sounds so easy. But our top performers, if you talk to all of them, they're creating a list every single night or every single day at the end of their day. They're going through what they need to do for follow-ups. They're going through who they need to do for new prospecting. And everybody's got a little bit different of a system. We've got the cold callers that are extremely successful, but they know what their daily action has to look like as a cold caller. I've got reps that are, some of the most successful in our company, and they probably haven't made a cold call in a couple years, but they know what their daily action has to be from the networking standpoint or the partnership standpoint. I've got to
Right.
call on this many partners. I've got to, network with this many people. And then they consistently work that every single day. They run professional appointments. And then they're really good at time management. They'll understand,
Yeah.
this is what I have to do. When I have this segment blocked off, this is what I'm prospecting. No matter what,
Right.
I've got an hour of prospecting. I've got to
Right.
get this in. And so it kind of all just circles back around to the system of knowing what their strengths are, whether it's cold calling, networking, developing partnerships,
Sure.
and growing it out that way each and every single day.
Yep. Yeah, I love it. I think you hit the nail right on the head. I mean, this is such a weird industry to me where it's like, what other job is there where all you have to do is treat it like a job and you're going to make
Yep.
tons and tons of money. Like it's not, as long as you got basic sales skills, you know what I mean? And you're willing to put the work in. But yeah, it's amazing to me when I go out, when I talk to salespeople I talked to one just recently, super, super successful, huge book of business, massive success. And I'm like, hey, tell me about your schedule, And he's like, I go to the gym in the morning. I'm usually prospecting around 10 a.m. And he said, I just stay in the field and I prospect until I got to pick my kids up at 4. And I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, what else do you do? He's like, in the evening, I work for like an hour getting stuff ready for the next day. It's like,
Yeah.
seriously? No, he's really good at sales, right? So of course he has that skill variable there, right? But you don't have to do that much. The sales reps I talk to that are not successful, they're literally like, I haven't prospected in 3 weeks. And I'm like, well, what are you talking to me for? What am I going to tell you to do? Go prospecting. What do you think's going to happen? You're not going to be successful. So you have to actually put the work in, but it really is amazing when you're consistent and you have an action plan and you stick to it. This is a business that honestly, I think it's kind of hard to fail,
Yeah. If they have that and they've got a, specific way about building out their business, like you said,
Right.
whether it's the cold calling or the networking or, developing different partnerships, they're going to send them referrals.
Right.
They're going to find success if they're doing it every day. I mean, they'll trip over enough people that are upset with their current provider that
Sure.
they'll find success.
Sure. Okay, so last questions here. We're kind of getting to the end here, but I want to just real briefly get really specific about Beyond for just a second here. So one of the kind of perceived downsides to the W-2 model is that sure, it's potentially better for, you're brand new getting into the industry. You've got more, training, you've got more of these, structure, but the compensation is geared a little more like maybe front loaded versus back loaded with residual. So talk to me about, the long term. Why would an agent stay with Beyond for the long haul? What is that path to success, to like larger success, look like? Somebody like yourself that stayed in the business for a long time. Give me kind of that long-term vision that you cast for your reps so that our listeners would have a little bit of a better understanding of the W-2 model and why people, choose that.
Yeah, I think one of the things right now for where we're at Beyond, and the reason that I came over to Beyond, I saw what Bob had done with Heartland,
right,
and the financial success that he had created for so many of them with different stock options by
right,
taking them through an IPO
right,
and then selling them for $103 a share to Global. So I saw that path, and that's the path that we're trying to recreate here at Beyond. Now, is that a promise that part's going to happen? No, but it's something that we highly believe in, and we think that we're on the right path to get there.
Sure.
So that's number one, because we've had reps, and we'll run different incentive contests where we had reps, earn up to $35,000 to $50,000 worth of stock options.
Right.
And I mean, we just saw what Shift 4 went through, and their stock is trading at $34 a share right now.
Right.
So those can obviously create serious wealth if you stack those up, and we've got different ways to stack that up through contest. And so the other part of it is, what is true financial success for everyone,
right.
here? There's different ways that you can build portfolio equity through Beyond. And I know some of our top reps have, sold back their portion of their book for, in the first couple of years, already hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Right.
They're creating upfront signing bonuses
right.
to where, they need to cover bills out the gate. And then, they can obviously create some true wealth through their residual piece as well. Is there going to be always the biggest cut versus what you're going to get at some, 1099? That's probably not always going to be there, but that's because we're providing different values in the portfolio equity and then also the stock options. And, we're running an incentive contest right now, and I don't know what, exactly everybody's looking for from a wealth side, but some of our top performers are going to get a $30,000 check, at the end of the year,
Right.
come January, because they performed, and they
Right.
can turn that into stock options, or they can take that in cash. And we run incentives like that, nonstop. So
Right.
I think that's pieces of it. And then understanding your strength as well. Some people could be successful no matter if they're at Beyond or if they're running their own company somewhere else and just selling as a one-man show. But a lot of our successful reps are dependent on, some of the leadership that is out there working with them every day.
Right.
And that's always going to be important to them as well. So
Yep.
there's different ways to get there. And you just have to understand the comp model and how you leverage that as your platform.
Yeah. It's just to add to that and kind of my own feeling as I work with 1099 and W-2 companies alike, again, going back to what I said earlier about, personality, right? Like I think there's obviously, like you just said, there's some people that would succeed as 1099 or W-2, but I think a really important concept for agents to think about is potential success versus actual success. So a lot of times, I'll talk to an agent that's like, oh man, I've got this opportunity. I can get X, percentage split and whatever else. And it's like, okay, cool. So are you making a lot of money? No. Well, why not? Well, I'm not prospecting. I don't really know what I'm doing. I don't have any accountability. I like to have a team to talk to, but I don't have anybody. And it's like, so who cares that your split is really big? You're not selling anything, So it's like, I think a lot of it is there's a lot of people that it's like self-awareness of put yourself in the best position to succeed. And in this industry, success is always going to be a function of the number of sales you make. So yeah, your percentage is kind of obviously important when all apples to apples, but it's not apples to apples. You've got to figure out where can you be successful, right? So it's like if you have this amazing comp plan somewhere, high splits, and you're prospecting 50 hours a week, good for you. But if you're struggling and need the structure and the accountability and you realize, wow, I would do better with a team, well, then you got to look around, So I think there's that, I think there's that idea where salespeople get sometimes taken into something where they feel like there's a big potential success, but they actually never have the structure or accountability or training to accomplish it.
Yeah, I think that's key. And then, it's kind of different. Like when we talked out in the beginning is what is everybody's financial success? Like, what does that look like for them? Some of them, it looks like, hey, I want to come, I want to make some money. I want to earn this trip where we go on a trip to, some beach somewhere. And, I want to have a good time. And I want to make sure that I'm at every single one of my kids' soccer games and football games. And, that's a part of it as well. And that sometimes the 1099 world's the best for them, and sometimes the W-2. It's just kind of up to the person for what the best fit is. And then the other part is, with where we're at as a W-2, if you come on, you get vested, those are going to be lifetime residuals for you. In the 1099 world, some of these people are getting taken advantage of in some crazy contracts, the same way that merchants have as well.
Sure.
So unless you're really understanding all of that language, I think that's important. Finding experts like you or other people in the industry to help you navigate the 1099 part can be important as well, so you don't get caught in some sort of crazy contract like many of the merchants that we run into.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Blake, this has been super interesting, actually. I love talking to people that I spend a lot of my time talking to the president, CEO, whatever, that hasn't sold anybody in 10 years or whatever, and which I love, don't get me wrong. But I love having conversations with people that are managing the frontline salespeople, because that's what I'm really passionate about, and helping those individual salespeople. So I really appreciate you taking the time. Before we go, though, I'm sure some of our listeners may want to learn more about you and the Beyond team and the opportunity. Where would you send them to learn more?
Yeah, go to our website, getbeyond.com. Check me out on LinkedIn, Blake Wilson. I'm in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. Send me a message. Love to chat. And then, to you as well, you've been putting out content for a long time. I've absorbed a lot of it over the years, especially when I was out in the field. So appreciate everything you do for the industry. I think you help a lot of people out that you probably don't even understand the ways that you're getting to.
That's awesome, man. Hey, thanks, Blake, so much for following the content, and just appreciate you taking the time. So have an awesome day.
And now, here is Questions from the Field with James Shepard.
Hey everybody, I'm back here with Questions from the Field, and I want to talk to you today about a really interesting thing, and that is, what is your number? What is your number? I have been talking about this so much. I actually just put a post out in our private Facebook group. If you're not a member, you got to check it out. We actually just reached over 1,000 members. If you go to Facebook, excuse me, if you go to Facebook and search for CC Sales Pro Community, you'll find it there. And, I just put a post in there about this, but there's really only one goal that every merchant services sales rep needs to have, and that is the number of contacts that you're going to make either daily or weekly. Okay, so it's an activity goal. So when I say, what is your number? The question is, what is the number of contacts that you're going to make on a weekly or daily basis? And in the Facebook post I made, I broke it down into several different ways you could look at this. So one way I said is you could actually go back before the idea of the contact and actually look at prospecting activity. So you could go and say, I'm actually going to walk into 20 businesses a day, right? That could be your goal. It's purely an activity goal. You realize that activity is going to convert into 5 good contacts on average, but you're just looking at, I'm going to walk into 20 businesses a day. The other thing is you could say, no, you know what? I actually really do need to track my number of contacts a day. That needs to be my goal because I'm doing, networking events. I'm doing other things. I'm doing, some cold calling. I'm doing appointment setting. I'm doing advertising. And so, when you do multiple things, I find a lot of salespeople struggle with this where they're a little bit more advanced in terms of their talents in the marketing arena and the networking. And so they're doing a lot of different things and they have a really hard time putting a number on their productivity. And at the end of the day, if they're not careful, they might feel productive when in fact they weren't productive. They were just busy. They went to 3 networking events, but they actually didn't make any new contacts there. And so you got to be careful to make sure you define a contact. A contact is, you having a real conversation with a qualified decision maker for the first time. Let me say that again. A contact is you having a real conversation with a qualified decision maker for the first time. So if you set that goal, and let's say you were to set that goal at 3 to 5 a day, which is pretty good. If you set that up and said, I'm going to have 3 to 5 new contacts with qualified decision makers every day, well, then if you go to a networking event and you get 1 new contact, even though you maybe had a meeting with 40 different people where you were up there making a presentation, but you only got 1 new contact, you're going to say, well, you know what? I got to go walk into some businesses or I got to make some cold calls because I only have 1. I need to get 4 more. And so I have my goal. And maybe you got in a lead from LinkedIn as well. So you got 2 contacts, right? You called them and you had a conversation. So you have 2 contacts. So you need 3 more. But you've got to have that number and say it's a number of contacts. Finally, the third option is you could actually look at this and say an amount of time. So if you're a very scheduled person, you really enjoy living by a schedule, then you could say, I'm going to go prospecting for X amount of time per day. Now, remember when we're talking about prospecting goals or number of hours, prospecting is where you are attempting to get in contact with a qualified decision maker for the first time. So in your prospecting time, that doesn't include follow-ups. Follow-ups are separate. You got to make sure in your mind, mentally, that's a separate thing. So if you're a very scheduled person and you like to, schedule your day out to the minute or at least to the hour, then I would go that route. And you say, I'm going to prospect at least 2 hours a day or 3 hours a day. But whatever that goal is, what is your number? You need to have just one. Pick one of those 3 that I just mentioned and figure it out. So kind of go, okay, how many contacts do I need to make in a month, right, in order to hit my goal, okay? So divide that by 20 working days a month. So how many do I need to make a day in order to hit my ultimate goal? And then go, okay, is that my goal? Or do I need to break that down further into an amount of time? Or do I need to break that down into an amount of activity? I'm going to walk into X number or make so many calls. So you've really got to break these numbers down and understand them. But ultimately, the goal of having this deeper understanding of your numbers is to come up with one very simple number. And I'll give you one last tip, just a funny thing that I added in the Facebook post that I was talking about. I talked about brushing your teeth, and I said the way that you can tell if you have one of these numbers I'm talking about, like 5 contacts a day or 20 business walk-ins a day or 50 cold calls a day or 2 hours of prospecting a day, if you have one of these goals, the way you can tell if you have a real goal is this test, okay? You should be just as likely to forget to brush your teeth that day as you are to not do the number that you have set. So it should be, if your goal is, I walk into 20 businesses a day, then it should be just as likely that you forgot to brush your teeth today as it would be that you didn't walk into 20 businesses. Those 2 outcomes should be about the same. And if you're not brushing your teeth every day, you have bigger problems if you're in sales, right? So, I would encourage you to get a goal, stick to the goal consistently over time, You'll be glad that you did. My name is James Shepard. Thank you for watching and listening.
Thank you for listening to the Merchant Sales Podcast. Whether you are an industry veteran, processing executive, or just trying to learn about the payment space, we appreciate your time. The Merchant Sales Podcast is a joint production of Greensheet.com and ccsalespro.com, and we hope you will tune in next week for more information and tips on building your merchant services business.